Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. My name is Dabney Lawless, and today I am very excited because I am welcoming Rachel Lang. She is an astrologer, she's an author, she's a teacher, and she's a psychic medium. So she has got so much going on. She's incredibly successful, very prolific. I was just talking to her about how I don't even think I could remotely keep up with her. So she has some really amazing information to share with us about our moon and how we can tap into our moon to expand our psychic awareness. So, if this is content you're interested in, I hope you stick around. So, welcome, Rachel.
Hey, thanks so much, Dabney. It's great to be back on your show.
Yeah, so Rachel's one of the people that I have turned to for teaching myself. So she always has so many amazing classes, and she does have a class coming up through the Shift Network called Empowering Your Psychic Ability Through Astrology. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay. So, and that was going to start in November. So, I'm going to put all the information below in the description. So, please make sure that if you have ever wanted to kind of tap into your psychic abilities, like you know that you are an intuitive person, you know you're somebody that, the phone rings and you knew who was on the other end, or you had a dream and it was one of those things that 2 days later, it just all made sense because it was giving you a message. Pay attention to that because there is so much psychic energy going on right now as we're filming this. It is November 1st. So it is the Day of the Dead. It is a Scorpio new moon. Like, this is the perfect time for us to be talking about all of this. So I think that's all the housekeeping I wanted to do. So let's talk about your class. Just give us a little intro into what it is that is the tie between being psychic and astrology.
Yeah. So the class is a kind of a combination. It's really how do you merge the two? So it's for astrologers who want to open up to their intuition, and it's for people who are psychic or people who are very clear about their intuition if they want to incorporate another tool in their toolbox for more precise timing, for something to help add to the access points to their spiritual gifts.
Okay, so as someone who is a professional astrologer, if I've
Uh-huh.
always been very empathic and intuitive, would this be a good class for me to kind of take it to the next level?
Absolutely. Yeah, because you would learn techniques and practices for how to ground the psychic and intuitive information, how to trust it. Sometimes I think we're all psychic, we're all intuitive. It's who we are at our core, but we all have different ways of accessing it and different entry points to it. And when you learn your unique psychic blueprint, and you discover the entry points to it, then you have this reliable guidance system that is always there for you and that you can read. So, I mean, I think it's like any language. Like, so I think of both what connects both psychic mediumship and astrology is language. I mean, they're both ways of translating spiritual information, cosmic information, and also guiding information. Um, my dog is, can you hear my dog in the background? He must really like you because he keeps on making some noise.
That's
Um,
actually, you know what we have? I have cats and they like
uh-huh,
walk in front of the screen all the time. So
yeah,
I actually think it's a good sign when
okay,
our pets are joining
uh-huh,
the video. So
yeah,
if your pet wants to
okay,
come say hi, we're all
okay. Come on, just come on, come on.
about it.
Okay, there we go. All right, he just needed to get up on my lap. All right, there we
Oh, hi there,
go.
dude.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that.
Don't be. I think, like I said, I
Um,
think that's a good thing. And
yeah.
I know, before you get back on track, I just have to also say this is little psychic energy because we did not both plan to be wearing hot pink.
I know. It's so true.
I'm not sure if I've
Uh-huh.
even ever worn this shirt in a video. So,
I
anyway,
love it. Oh my gosh, that is so fun. Yeah.
just radiating that Scorpio,
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah, I think so.
female
I think
power
so.
energy.
That's
Okay.
right.
Well, so I also find that so I love that you say that everybody's got some psychic energy in their
Mhm.
chart. And I do readings for people, and like sometimes it just really jumps out at you. I mean, there's definitely some markers where you're like, oh, wow, that Neptune's right on the ascendant, or Pluto's in the first house right next to your moon, or you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things that will kind of jump out at you, like a big eighth house. Do you want to just talk really briefly before we get into the moon?
Sure.
What are
Yeah.
some big things that jump out at you that would kind of be a marker of somebody who has some pretty intense psychic juju?
Sure, sure. Well, I think you're right about Neptune. Neptune is the planet that relates to our access points to other realms. So, and I think there are different ways that our psychic gifts express themselves. Some people have more telepathic ones, where it's like mind to mind communication, or they can do. I think mediumship is a form of telepathy. Um, some people have connect with angels in the angelic realm. Some people are very grounded in their psychic experience, and so they feel things in their bodies. And so these are the kinds of people who are channeling energy through. So they might not be going out into outer space and having these astral projection experiences, but their experiences of psychic phenomena are deeply felt, and in their hands, in their guts, in their bodies. I think there's clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. And so it's a way of seeing visions in your mind's eye, or sometimes actually physically. Clairaudience is clear hearing. And so that is receiving messages in your mind that sometimes can sound like thoughts, but they're not yours, or actually hearing words, hearing things being spoken, or little sounds. And then there's clairalience, which is smelling. So some people receive the smell of a cigarette smoke for their grandfathers, or their grandmother's Italian casseroles, or perfume. Clairsentience is when you actually feel something with your physical sensation. And then claircognizance is like a clear knowing. And it's like, I just know what I know, and I don't know how I know it. And clairgustance is clear tasting. So it's when some people can actually taste their grandmother who's passed, her casserole, or taste the the different messages come in the form of flavors. So there are all kinds of ways to access this information. And I think when many of us think about our psychic skills, we think of that transcendent, sort of out of body, disassociated experience. But really, most of us, all of us, are here in a physical form. And so we are all going to be figuring out how to access that guidance from within our own awareness, and from the spirit realm. We're accessing that within our physical senses usually.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. So I don't think I realized some of that, different ways in which people kind of, I mean, I do know that there are some people who have like Reiki and like healing in their hands, but some of these other things it's kind of, that's really, really interesting. And so I could see where then if you're in a conversation with somebody and looking at their chart, you can kind of help explore where they're feeling that level of intuition or something, that kind of knowing. So what are the things that you look at? It sounds like the moon is a really big one because that's
Mhm.
our feeling sense. So
Yeah.
how does the moon play into this?
Yeah, the moon is a really big one. And before we get into the moon, because there's a lot to talk about with the moon, I think a couple of you asked me this question, just to, and I answered it in part, but I just realized, like, oh yeah, that's right, I didn't talk about those other factors. But I think Neptune is a big player in terms of our psychic awareness. Neptune shows us where we can merge with other people, where we can dissolve the boundaries of our own auras, and open up. So if you have Neptune on the ascendant, yes, that makes you very open to other people's emotions, other people's energies. Um, I think eighth house and 12th house placements are really powerful for being able to access the invisible realms. 12th house is more of the psychic realm. And I see this a lot with people, with my friends or clients who are mediums or who do like spiritual work, healing work in some way. Having 12th house planets, in particular the personal planets, is usually something I see. And then 8th house tends to be more of you're actually working to transmute energy. So the 12th house is I'm going into these other realms, getting information, bringing it back. And the 8th house is I can see the shadows and I'm going to help to heal them, to transmute energy.
Boy, love that for a description of the eighth house.
Mm-hmm.
That's very potent. I have an eighth house moon, so I feel that very, but I don't have all these other clear audio, or I don't have like a sense of smell or taste or anything like that. But when I do an astrology reading, sometimes I don't even have to look at the aspects or anything. It just all sort of coalesces into a story.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me has always been a little bit of like a psychic ability for me, just kind of knowing what the other person, what they need to hear from the chart. And so for me, that's been kind of my experience. But I can't really say that that's being psychic because I don't have like a message from somebody but it's just kind of like I look at the chart and all of a sudden a story pops out at me.
Mm-hmm. I think that is that is the same. I think that's the same process though. Psychic, what differentiates psychic awareness from mediumship is that psychic awareness is soul to soul. And so that's what you're doing. You're describing the process of soul to soul communication, and you're referring to the chart as your entry point in. It's like that's the doorway that you can access the connection with someone's soul. And that's so brilliant because this is, I think a lot of us who are astrologers are doing this, and wouldn't it be helpful? I mean, I designed this course so to actually provide a framework within which you can do that, within which you can look at a chart and use it as a divination tool, use it as a way of glancing at someone's chart, looking at it and allowing the aspect that most needs to be picked out and shown a light on. You can go through that process, and it sounds like you're already doing a version of that. So yeah, and then also for people who have their gifts and they don't know how to they want to develop them further, or they don't know how to frame them, astrology can provide a framework within which you have very clear uh, descriptors in terms of timing, in terms of different planetary cycles. It's like it gives you a language of symbols that you can use to add to your repertoire of symbols that you're already using in your psychic mediumship work.
Yeah, there's so much like beautiful crossover, and I don't think that that's something I fully grasped until recently. That things like tarot cards and um, astrology and ceremonial work, all of these things really are just tools to kind of get us to communicate something outside of just the typical, like, how are you feeling today? Oh, I'm fine, thank you. How are you? It just takes us into another realm where we can expand our consciousness, but everybody has different tools that help them do that. And we do get stuck. We get stuck. Like sometimes, like I get stuck. I can look at an astrology chart, understand for myself what the themes are that I'm working with, but acutely, like picking a card, an oracle card, is going to actually help me get out of my mind a lot easier than, because the astrology can mean so many different things. And we all have like especially as astrologers, there's a little baggage around our chart, it's like, oh, that's because of this, or, so
Uh-huh.
yeah. Well, I do love the way that you teach, and Rachel is she really does have this kind of magical sense of pulling the chart together. I was taking an astrology class with her not that long ago, and we pulled up the chart of the meeting of my husband and I, and like it blew me away because she already knew the story of us before I said a word, and so she does have kind of some interesting techniques. So if you are an astrologer, she has, I'm learning new things from her, which is really cool. So that kind of is more, like she said, divination, a little bit more kind of taking it beyond just the like, you like to cook, just the sun sign basic stuff. So, okay, so now I do think people are going to be very interested, and I'm terrible at time stamping, but I will
Yeah.
timestamp this.
Okay, good.
Not going to
Good,
be
good.
lazy this time. And so so let's talk about, the different moons and what, you think that is something that people can learn about their own psychic energy.
Mhm. So the moon is the receiving channel of our chart. It if I think about it in terms of when the first point in our chart that we become familiar with is our moon. And that's because we have to figure out a way to relate intuitively without any words, without any facial expressions, without even really the use of our eyesight. We have to learn how to communicate with our caregivers, our mothers. For some of us, that's our actual mothers, uh, the one who is nurturing us and feeding us. We have to be able to relate to them in order to survive. And so the moon represents that part of us that is figuring out, and just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to use mom, even though I know there are so many different ways families are and held together. But so we have to look at our mom and we have to figure out, how am I going to tell her that I'm hungry? Because to an infant, being hungry is terrifying. It is, I mean, I would imagine it's like the pain of hunger and the like fear of not surviving, and you're reliant on mother. So the moon represents, how do I communicate? How do I receive information and know how's mom doing? And uh, how do I connect with her in a way that gets my needs met? So the moon is the receiving channel. So we receive information, and and it's the great attractor. And so it's the unconscious information that we receive. And ultimately, when we're talking about the moon, we're talking about the subtle realm within ourselves. We're talking about the soul as opposed to the spirit, which is the sun. And you can see even in the glyphs, the sun is the circle with the dot in the center. All of these glyphs are designed, or were thought up, to explain the different aspects of the totality of the self. And so when you see that curved line of the moon, that's the soul. And when you see the full circle, that's the spirit. And so anywhere you see in a glyph a half circle, that's the soul, a whole circle, that's the spirit. The soul is the part of us that holds the karmic imprint, that holds the emotional and psychological contents of our history, our Akashic records, our soul story, what we're here to heal, what we're here to feel. The spirit is the framework for that. It's like, well, this is what I do so that I can meet the soul's needs. So the soul has needs. The sun says, the spirit says, I'm gonna go do this and this and this and this so that I can get your needs met. So the soul is what we relate to when we're connecting one-on-one in psychic information. We also relate to the spirit too. I mean, we're all whole. We can't separate them totally, but it helps to have language for it so that you can reference it when you're going into that information. And so the moon represents that part of us that holds memory, and that is when we're speaking to it, we're speaking to our deepest needs. Because the moon works in subtle realms, meaning imagination, meaning the nonverbal, physical, subconscious clues, dreams, artwork, our creative processes. Because the moon works in subtle realms, it can be the transmitter of information that is in those subtle realms. So when you're psychic or when you're a medium, you're constantly playing in this field of the subtle realms. Spirits don't come to you and say, "Hey, Dabney, I've been thinking we should go out for coffee." No, they come to you. And they either, put a pen, find a way to put a penny on your path, or they'll give you the smell of a coffee, or they'll, sometimes my ears ring, like I'll have a ringing of the ear for certain spirits. Like they're giving you signs the only way they can, and that is through very subtle information. A feather on your path, a song that plays in the middle of the store that is like a song that is so meaningful for you, that connects you to someone from your past or from who has passed. Spirit is constantly trying to find a way to reach us. And so the moon is the entry point for that connection. That was a
Amazing.
really long answer. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
That was beautiful. And I think there's a lot of value in everything that you said. And what I always think of and describe as synchronicities,
Hmm.
that's really beautiful to kind of think of those synchronicities as tying into a pattern or something bigger where there's spirits trying to send you a message. And those synchronicities, we pay attention, like how did I suddenly see that person again for the first time, and then that led to something that changed my career, or whatever the thing is. I know for me that hummingbirds, whenever I see a hummingbird, it is a really good reminder of settling into my own joy and coming back into that sense of, oh, that's a message from spirit, like that's, that whatever I was thinking at that moment, I try to recognize that that was an affirmation.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that.
So, what would you say? So how do you work with people, clients, or when you're teaching people? Like if you have like different, like the Aries moon, the Taurus moon,
Mhm.
is there something kind of unique to the moon for each
Mhm.
of the different signs?
Yeah, well, I think the moon tells you how you receive psychic information. And the moon, and so I'll break it down by element first, and then we can go from there. But I think air sign moons are the communicators. And so these, I think that I know a lot of people. It's funny, a lot of people I studied with, like my friends who I went to mediumship training with, and a lot of the people I've stayed connecting with, a lot of us have air sign moons. Gemini moons in particular. I know so many mediums with Gemini moons. And it's because we're translators, because we know how to put into words the subtle information. And so I can talk to a spirit guide or a loved one who's crossed, and they can give me little flashes of pictures, or they can give me a sound, and I can take all of those pictures and come up with a message. Like, oh, they're showing me an apartment, a brownstone apartment. They're showing me they're walking upstairs. And then, and somehow frame that in, oh, this is a memory of a time when they moved into their first house. And so it's a translation process. So I find air sign moons are just have a natural ability to put things into words, to communicate. So telepathy, clairvoyance, clairaudience, those are skills that I find with air sign moons. And each air sign is going to be a little bit different in how they express it. So a Gemini moon is going to be one that is using words, and they're going to approach it like putting together a puzzle piece, or like an investigative journalist, asking questions, looking at all the different details. A Libra moon is going to be more inclined to want to relate to an individual. And so there's like, for all air sign moons, they are more of the active polarity, the diurnal or active polarity. And so there is this strong need to take subtle information and express it out and receive feedback. So usually the air sign moon is developing their gifts, or using their gifts in a way that is externalized somehow, either through writing or through speaking or through talking things out. So Libra is going to be very focused on messages that pertain to how to create more harmony and balance. So actually, even music can be an entry point for a Libra moon, or art somehow. There are all kinds of ways to work with art in psychic mediumship. And then the Aquarius moon is likely going to be thinking about groups or classes, developing their gifts in groups, teaching, sharing their gifts in larger groups. But anything related to the intellect, that is the entry point for an air sign moon.
I love it's interesting about Libra because you don't tend to think, I personally don't tend to think of Libra moons as being incredibly like intuitive, but they are. They're so incredibly intuitive because in order to find that common ground, that any sort of diplomat has to be able to kind of absorb the connections that they're making around them and kind of bring it into balance. So that's kind of a cool way of looking at a Libra moon that I had not thought of before. So that's really neat.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So now what about, would you like to go to the Earth moons next?
Sure, let's do that. Yeah. So I think Earth is uh is sometimes underestimated. When we think about psychic mediumship, we're thinking again of like, let's go out there and transcend the body. No. An earth sign moon wants to have a very physical experience of that connection with spirit or with their own psychic gifts. And so these are our natural empaths. Earth and water moons both are nocturnal, which means they're more receptive, which means that they have access to more just intuitive, psychic knowing. And they don't need a whole lot of validation they don't need to externalize it. It can just be a knowing that's held within. Or if they're doing it professionally, they can ground that practice in their own awareness. And so earth sign moons, I find, can have a little bit of a difficult time with going to a sound bath, and all of their water sign friends are having these mystical experiences and seeing things, and they're like, I didn't get anything. Their friends over here at their psychic or tarot classes are seeing colors and hearing from loved ones in spirit, and they're like, I'm not getting anything. But I'm feeling a lot of sensation. All of a sudden, my knee hurts. All of a sudden, I'm having, an itchy head. All of a sudden, I have to pee. These are all psychic impressions. the information is coursing through the body, but because they have an earth sign moon, they are very much embodied. And so they have their own guidance system, their own psychic awareness in a felt sense. So clairsentience, claircognizance would be theirs. Also clairalience, which is the smelling.
What were the other two you just said? Claire Cog?
Sentience,
Cog-
cognizance is clair knowing, and I find that with water moons, that's their thing. They just
Okay.
know what they know. But Earth moons can too, and it's like in my body I feel it.
Mhm.
Um, and so claircognizance is the clear knowing. Clairsentience is the clear feeling.
Okay, so let's break it down. Taurus, Virgo,
Yeah,
and
yeah. So Taurus is theirs is probably the most grounded and sensual of all of them. And so they're going to experience their own psychic awareness in the subtle movements of their everyday lives. And also through art,
Mm.
through any kind of design process, or like drawing, painting, graphic design, vision boards, flowers. They have a very earth-centered access point. And so also the sensual experience of food, which is why Claire Gustins, which is the taste, is one of theirs. So anything that involves the physical body.
Yeah, and so like flower essences and
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that, they probably could work with that and heal themselves and heal other people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I also think things like psychometry, which are when you take an object and you hold the object, like if you take your grandmother's ring to someone who specializes in this, and they hold the ring and they can receive all kinds of information about the individual or about you just by holding an object. So that can be another point. Virgo moons. Virgo is interesting because it has that Mercury rulership or association. And so I find Virgos can do things like automatic writing really well. And so they have a level of telepathy too, but it's within the physical experience as well. And so here you have they still have the access to clairaudience, but automatic writing is one of their gifts. I would say also space clearing. Virgo moons are excellent at going into a place and determining where there is energy that is not supportive and how can we get rid of it. So they are natural healers. And I find a lot of Virgo moons get into practices like alternative healing or health practices. And so that's a real specialty for them.
Yeah, I'm a Virgo moon.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
I definitely have, and I pick up other people's energy, but I can also agree that like I've been to like the sound baths and things, and I'm like, I just no, not. I'm not going where you are.
Uh-huh.
That's okay.
Yeah.
'Cause, I think it's that analytical brain that like helps me then like with the astrology. And so like I get my messages through analyzing. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Totally, totally. So don't feel bad that you're not having those like, psychedelic experiences. That's actually by design. Oh, and there's your
yeah,
cat.
I see.
You see-
She
So
loves
you
it.
have
Like,
you have you have synchronicities with your animal messengers and things like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, that's good to know that because for those of us, like I've tried to do ancestral, like where you kind of talk to your ancestors, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so I've had to learn that. So I think that that's what's so valuable about this video. And hopefully, if people take your class, like really kind of honing in on like what's your special way and understanding like you might be having, experiences that are bigger than yourself, but you just don't recognize it as such.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's why I think astrology can help so much. Because if you are wanting to develop your gifts and you're a Virgo moon, and you take an astral projection class and you're just not getting it, what are you going to think? You're going to think, I'm not psychic.
Right.
Oh, that's not for me. But it's for all of us. And we're at a point right now the with the outer planets changing signs over the next couple of, we're at a point right now where none of us can afford to to be separated from our gifts or from the access points to our gifts.
I'm
Yeah.
scooching over here. I had a big like
Okay.
sunspot on my face. All right. Well, we don't want to short shrift
Yeah.
Capricorn. So
Capricorn. Yeah. Yeah.
it's an interesting one.
Yeah, so Capricorn is very interesting. So I find that Capricorn, and the moon is not as happy as it could be in Capricorn as it is, because it's in detriment. And so I find that Capricorn picks up a lot of their psychic information just by their feelings and what they're feeling, what they're not feeling. Like it's all there. They are really attuned to the the information that comes through the synchronicities in their lives. Finding a penny on the ground, the cat walking across the path, the hummingbird at the feeder. These are all ways that the Capricorn moon can feel connected to source. Capricorn moons are also, they can develop pretty much any gift if they just put their effort to it and have a goal toward it. And usually they want to do the thing that comes the least easy, just because they're like, the challenge of it is so interesting. But I would see like healing, like physical hands-on healing being great for Capricorns. Also working with plants, working with alchemical, and this goes for any earth sign moon, working with plant uh, medicines, flower essences, teas, in a very ritual or ceremonial way, I think could be a really great entry point for Capricorn moons.
I love that. Yeah, just
Mhm.
things that grow from the land and
Yeah.
working with it. I know a Capricorn moon and she does tobacco ceremonies.
Ah,
And so I think that that's
oh,
a
how perfect is that?
illustration of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hemp, so hemp, Capricorn, Saturn rules hemp. Um, and so that is another thing that can and that can be related to.
It can, yeah, it can be a spirit medicine for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
used correctly. Yeah. Okay. So now we know that the water signs definitely have some juju. So let's go through those and talk a little bit about what the water signs have and
Sure. Yeah,
psychic.
water signs. Water is the sign of emotions. And it's the sign of the water is the element that relates to the subtle fields. And so water signs are natural empaths. They're naturally sending and receiving emotional and soul related communication all the time. Um, but their challenge is that a lot of them, and Pisces moons in particular, so we'll start with Pisces. So Pisces moons in particular are very claircognizant. They know what they know. And sometimes that can be really difficult because you just don't trust all the time what you know. And so there's a natural flow of energy, emotional energy, usually psychic energy. And so they're kind of the universal donor, so to speak, of psychic information. It's like they can access mediumship, they can access other realms, dream work, going into depth psychology, healing is I think a a way of expressing that. But one of the challenges can be that a Pisces moon needs structure and it needs boundaries. It's like all water, and so water needs a container. And so that's one feature of the Pisces moon. Uh, Scorpio moons. are also very psychic, and they're great at seeing the shadows. So transmuting darkness, transmuting things from one form into another. So this is where you have your, again, space clearing. You have your doing shadow work, working with, spiritual healing. Scorpio moons tend to have a real way of going into the paranormal. So ghostbustering. uh, there's a natural awareness of death and cycles of death and rebirth. So this is where you have your death doulas, you have your midwives, people who are there on the front lines during times of crisis. And that's your Scorpio moon. Very clairsentient, very claircognizant, um, mm, and also just they know what they know. And then we have our Cancer moons that are just very sensitive to others' emotions and to all of the emotions just coursing out there in the cosmos. So our Cancer moons have a sensitivity. Here you have just natural intuition. And in particular, Cancer moons are great at understanding what could go wrong, and how do we prepare for that? How do I create a safety nets for myself and for the people I love?
I love Cancer energy.
Yeah, me
Not my
too. Me too.
but I think that that's beautiful too. The Pisces moon, remembering that container because they have such a natural connection to something bigger than themselves. Without that container, I've found them they can get lost, and that's where you don't have a recognition of reality versus like it's hard to come back. That
Mhm.
kind of you cross that line of like, is that real? Am I imagining it? There's kind of this and so it's nice to have the container around it that helps you understand what you're good at so you can channel it, so then you don't just get lost in the imagination of it because they're so imaginative anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also think about like a Scorpio moon, like what I think of is and I don't know why I think of this, but I think of like sweat lodges, and I think of that kind of like healing work where it's like you said, like more deep shadow work, it's intense work, it's like getting back beneath the surface to
Mhm.
kind of bring forth our ancestry. I don't know.
Yeah.
Even though
Yeah.
Cancer's the ancestry, I just always really Scorpio has that really intense. Do you find that or
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good way of explaining it. Yeah, uh needs Scorpio moons need to have transformative processes to take the emotional contents that they can't quite articulate because there's so much emotional energy, and be able to like compress it down and understand it and make sense of it and then release it. So I think like even tantric practices and kundalini yoga, those kinds of things can also be entry points for a for Scorpio moon rather.
awesome?
Hmm.
Okay. All right, so fire signs.
Fire, yeah. So fire is this is these are I find these fire sign moons to be people who can take energy in and express it outward. And so I think of them as like the fire breathers. This is like there is a whole, or the snake handlers, like people who are having a passionate experience of their spirituality. And so fire sign moons usually have to have some kind of activity associated with it, whether it's walking meditation or it is, uh, rocking back and forth or twirling, or there are so many spiritual practices that involve movement, dance, ecstatic dance, five rhythms, those kinds of things. And a fire sign moon can can be incredibly psychic at picking up on big picture energy, on where you in your own emotional experience and your own individual experience are in relation to the bigger picture. And so, and especially Sagittarius, I'm gonna start with Sagittarius moon. Sagittarius moon can get in there and see the truth, and they can tell the truth. And so here you have your life coaches, your spiritual gurus, your pastors and preachers. Like, these are the people who can get right into the heart of you, look right in and see where the lie is, where you're lying to yourself or you're lying to others, not maliciously, but we all have, things that we're like, are blind spots, I should say.
Oh my
And
God.
Sagittarius, there are a number of black holes in Sagittarius, one at the galactic center, right between 26 and 27 Sagittarius. And black holes are entry points to other galaxies. And astrologically, they connect to other dimensions, they're entry points to other dimensions. And so Sagittarius moons have an ability to pick up on information that is like so far out of what we think or what we believe that it's like mind-blowing truth. And so they're the translators of intergalactic communication. I know this is getting like a little woo-woo right now, but they usually are bringing some kind of truth in, and they're saying, "Hey, this is truth," and you can't refute it. It's like, "Oh, you're right about that. I didn't see it that way, but you're right." And so they have this ability to channel, actually.
So where do people learn about that? Because I've heard of that through like
Yeah.
Ann Orley
Yeah.
and maybe even through you, but where would people learn about galactic centers and things like that? Because that's not something that it's often taught in astrology classes.
Yeah, Dabney, I'm going to teach a class on this next year, but I just haven't quite figured out when I'm going to teach it in the year. But this is that we need a class on black holes.
Okay.
So I'm getting ready to do and I've been studying them. I was really fortunate to study with a mentor, Thomas Parsons in Tennessee, and he was the one who introduced me to working with black holes. So I've been working with them for, 20 years. Uh, and not in he's really my teacher, so he paved the way for me in that respect. But yeah, so I need to have a class about this.
Okay, so we'll promise me you'll
Yep,
come back on to
I
talk about
will.
that when you're ready
Yeah.
to unleash that. Yeah, and that's the other thing that I think a lot of people don't always understand is like there are people out there now that are still doing like really powerful research in
Mhm.
astrology. And it's just kind of it's escalating, you know, and especially with
Mhm.
Pluto going into Aquarius, I think there's going to be even more and more knowledge that is
Mhm.
coming out, and we're all just going to be sort of blown away. So, okay,
Yeah.
well, Sagittarius, if you've
Yep.
got a
Uh-huh.
moon between 26 and 27 degrees, you have
Mhm.
got some galactic truth you're going to be channeling to the rest of the world. So,
That's right. And also we have other black holes at 12 and 13 and 4. I really like anywhere from 12 to 14 Sagittarius. So yeah, Sagittarius is full of these space, not little, they're big, huge space objects. And so Sagittarius moons tend to be a little, they might think they're a little out there, or people might be like, you're a little, they are, but they're bringing the out there to here.
oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to
Now,
look back at all my charts of my friends.
uh-huh. Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we still have Aries and Leo to get
I
to.
know. I know. Here, Leo moons are like, well, what about me? What about me? Okay,
Right.
you are really, really
I'm
special,
gonna
Leo moons.
timestamp it.
You're really special, Leo moons. Okay, so I think Leo moons, they feel, I think that uh, they have the ability to take cultural information, like big picture cultural information, the trends that are playing out or that will be playing out. They have the ability to tap into the zeitgeist. Leo is connected to the entertainment field. It's connected to music and performance. And so I think a lot of Leo's access to psychic information comes from the creative processes. It comes from the imagination, it comes from song, it comes from um, uh, color. It's a very expressive form of spirituality, but they have their finger on the pulse of what's happening. Also, Leo moons can, and I'm thinking like specifically of a couple that I know, they are the ones who are going to be more practical in terms of how they express their creative. Listen to me. It's creative and psychic are kind of one and the same for Leo moons, and they have a real need to express it in a way that people receive and understand. So they're not going to be like way out there, you know, perhaps talking about things that others can't relate to. They might be accessing, that kind of information, but they're going to communicate in a way that you can understand. They're going to try to reach you. So I find a lot of Leo moons go into speaking or having a YouTube channel or doing something where there's an element of performance to it.
Very cool. Well, I had an art teacher once, and I can't say that she had a Leo moon, but I think this is a great example of it. And I went into her art class, and she had all these beautiful bottles with oils and different colors, and it was this healing modality from the UK called Orosoma. And it was basically like these color therapies, these beautiful bottles with like jewel toned, and she would help guide you to pick the colors
Mm.
that like spoke to you. And so you could use this as kind of like a transformative potion. So I thought that was kind of cool, and that
Oh,
seems
yeah.
very like a Leo moon.
Very.
Yeah,
Yes, very, very much. Yeah.
very cool. Okay, Aries. You like to
Aries.
be first, but you're last.
I
Sorry.
know. Sorry, Aries. We love you, Aries moon. Aries moon, I find that Aries moon has a real ability to uh um it's funny. I always think of very specific people when I look at or when I think about this information. So Aries moon, you have the ability to perceive um so again, it's very similar to Scorpio in that they can see shadows. They understand what's lurking in the shadows, and so they can have a very finely tuned radar for the potential that someone could harm them, or like they are like the warriors, the spiritual warriors of the zodiac. And so I see this all the time with people working in like social justice or people who are activists, being aware of what could go wrong or what motives are happening beneath the surface and finding ways to be protective of other people or of themselves. And so that's a real gift. Some people are really oriented to seeing the light, to working with angels, to, Scorpio moons and Aries moons are really good at identifying the dark, that and then transmuting it. So that is one thing that Aries is excellent at. And so Aries moons are going to be ones who are going to push back. They're going to be ones who are willing to fight or who find themselves in conflicts because what they're co- what they're in conflict with isn't another individual, it is the other individual's shadow. And Aries has just shone a light on it and said, there you are, I see you. And even if Aries moon isn't doing this consciously, they are this is how they work. They can in any conversation, they can go in and they can pinpoint the part of the conversation that could be harmful to someone or to themselves. So being able to see and transmute shadow is such a valuable resource. Um, I find that they're also really good, therefore, at claircognizance, just like clear knowing, just like I know what I know. And they have this like belly fire that burns for this is what's true and this is what's not.
Yeah, like they use the word instinct versus intuition.
Yes. 100%. Yeah, that's a really good analysis. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's so what I think is very valuable for everybody watching is that they don't recognize that they have some psychic ability.
Yeah.
And so as a result, it's like, oh, that's just, that's psychics, or I don't believe in it, or I think there's something to it, but
Mhm.
I think breaking it down like that, then people can actually internalize where they actually do have psychic ability, even if they just call it a gut feeling or an instinct, or they, create beautiful works of art or music that just come out of nowhere. Like
Yeah.
I know a famous musician, they often don't sit down and like labor over writing the lyrics. It just is channeled through
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. That's how it works. And
Yeah.
that's an axis point. So every point in our chart shows us some aspect of our spirituality. But the moon is that receiving tower, like thinking about our auras as one great big radio tower sending and receiving messages. The moon is the receiving one. And so that's often the first point of entry when we're talking about our psychic abilities.
I've just learned something as I looked down and reflected on what you said. I have all these little pieces of
Ah,
paper.
how cool is that?
And I never thought about the fact that I've always, when I'm interviewing someone, I take notes. Like I take notes because, oh, that I want to come back to that, or that's interesting. But it's automatic writing, which Virgo moon, which is what you said, that and I never thought of it in that way. But if you ever see me looking down when I'm doing an interview versus a solo, if it's a solo, I'm writing notes. But I'm just,
Ah,
um,
yeah.
but yeah, so there is something to this. She knows her
Mhm.
stuff. I can vouch for her on so many levels, as can a ton of other people that have worked with her. So if you
Yeah.
have the ability to work with her, um, I think you're going to find it very valuable. So anything else you want to mention, Rachel? Because I know we've taken a lot of your time
Mhm.
here.
Yeah, I think one thing I'll just say that, if you're listening to this and you identify as someone who's very clairvoyant, and we didn't talk about your moon sign connected to that, I think I think we can all develop different types of entry points. What I'm talking about with the moon is that is what comes naturally. And so maybe it's an invitation to try some new ways of going in, of accessing your gifts. We have all of these different elements and qualities in our charts, and they are all giving us information about different aspects of ourselves. But I do think that the moon is one of I think personally the moon is, if you just followed your moon and just leaned into your moon for all of the wealth of access that it has, then that would be enough. And so perhaps you could anyone listening could take some time to develop a practice around that entry point. And we talk about that. That's what the class will be, really. I mean, that's what my course is going to be. It's going to be the access points, but it's also going to be looking at your chart like a divination tool.
Which is, so cool. I think that the more we know ourselves as astrologers, as humans, especially as we're moving into this Pluto moving into Aquarius, the
Mhm.
energy shifts in the next year, the more we can know ourselves and kind of have a sense of what's coming, have a
Mhm.
sense of how to calm ourselves. These are all just really valuable tools. And also it's a valuable tool that you probably have a gift that you can maybe help others with, whether you charge for that or not.
Exactly.
Well, Rachel, thank you for coming
Yes, thank you
on.
so much, Dabney. It's been joy as always, and I appreciate always our conversations, and I
Yeah,
love
and
your
we're gonna
show
have
so
her
much.
back for some galactic
Right. Yes,
information.
intergalactic stuff.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to that the universe is always conspiring to help us, and there is a reason and a season for it all. And so hang in there. We are all just getting through in the next week or two. But we can use our own internal gifts
Mm.
to make the world a better place, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I'm gonna say.
definitely.
Not the most
Definitely.
eloquent closing, but it'll do. So,
It's good.
all right,
It's good.
thanks, Rachel. You take
Thank
care.
you.